13 is a good way to go. So I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I now call up the Vitter Amendment number 2103, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Senator from Louisiana, Mr. Vitter, proposes an amendment number 2103.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to waive reading of the whole.
Without objection.
Mr. President, this amendment is born of a real frustration that a lot of folks have faced over the last few years, particularly in my state of Louisiana. As you know, Mr. President, we've had a rough time, particularly following the BP disaster. First, there was that real environmental disaster, which was a real shock to our system and our ecology. But second, and of even perhaps more lasting impact, there was the economic hit that was magnified enormously when the Obama administration, in my opinion, overreacted and instituted a full-blown moratorium on production drilling, rather, in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, that formal moratorium was ended in late 2010, but a de facto moratorium continued for many months, and even now there is a real permit logjam that has permitting at a much lower pace than before the BP disaster. This is a broader problem because, at least off the coast of Louisiana, we are producing some energy. In many, many other places of the country where we have an abundance of energy, we're not allowed to get it because this federal government, particularly under this Obama administration, puts well over 90% of our domestic resources off limits. In the midst of everything that was going on in the Gulf, in the midst of that moratorium shutting down jobs in the Gulf of Mexico, President Obama traveled to Brazil, and he said that the United States wanted to be a tremendous partner and cheerleader of the development of Brazil's offshore industry. Now, Mr. President, I have to tell you, that was like rubbing salt in the wound of tens of thousands of oil field workers and others who were suffering because of the Obama administration policy here in this country really discouraging energy development. The way President Obama proposed to be a strong supporter and partner and cheerleader of Brazilian offshore development was through an Ex-Im Bank loan. And there are many of these sorts of loans. Again, in August 2009, talking about Brazil, the case I mentioned, the Wall Street Journal reported in an editorial that, quote, the U.S. is going to lend billions of dollars to Brazil's state-owned oil company, Petrobras, to finance exploration of the huge offshore discovery in Brazil's Tupi oil field in the Santos Basin near Rio de Janeiro, close quote. Again, the Ex-Im Bank provided a $2 billion loan to aid Brazilian oil production, and that's what President Obama was cheering and encouraging and making happen. It's happened other places as well. Again, the Ex-Im Bank specifically approved a $2.84 billion loan and loan guarantee to a subsidiary of Colombia's national oil company. This money was intended to expand and upgrade an oil refinery in Colombia. And in 2011, the Ex-Im Bank again authorized $1 billion for Pemex, Mexico's national oil and gas company. So here we have this federal government, through the Ex-Im Bank, financing energy production overseas at the same time as this federal government tries to shut down and make difficult a lot of that activity here at home. That's the frustration that produced this amendment number 2103. And this amendment is simple. It simply says the Ex-Im Bank is not going to provide those loans or loan guarantees related to fossil fuel development in foreign countries if there are similar projects in this country that aren't getting comparable help. It's not suggesting that the Ex-Im Bank is going to participate directly in projects in this country. It simply says, first things first, American jobs, American energy, American production first. So we're not going to finance the world to produce energy when we create obstacles right here at home to do the same thing. Again, Mr. President, the last several years have proved the need for this sort of common sense provision, in my opinion. President Obama traveling to Brazil, ballyhooing the development of their energy industry, while his moratorium and other policies substantially shut down our own here in the United States, proves the need for this common sense amendment. And I urge all of my colleagues, Mr. President, Republicans and Democrats, to support this Vitter Amendment number 2103. Again, very simple, very logical, pure common sense. Before the Ex-Im Bank uses U.S. taxpayer money to fund, to finance, to guarantee oil and gas and other energy development overseas in foreign countries, we're going to look here at home to see if similar projects exist and are they getting any similar help or inducement from the federal government. I urge support of this, Mr. President, in a way to move forward in a common sense way on this reauthorization. Thank you, Mr. President. With that, I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I suggest we dispense with the calling of the quorum.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to rise to address the Vitter Amendment number 2103 in speaking in opposition to that amendment. As I said, like all these amendments that are up for us to vote on today, I believe are detrimental to not only the export-import financing program, but to the compromise that's been worked out by Republicans and Democrats in the House of Representatives and the legislation that is being supported by the Chamber of Commerce, U.S. manufacturers, bipartisan list of governors, and many businesses across America. The reason why the Vitter Amendment, I think, is a horrible idea, actually, is that the amendment would basically cut or curtail American companies and their ability to compete on energy projects on a worldwide basis. That is, it would eliminate the bank's current 10% goal for renewable energy projects, and this is a long-standing requirement that has been incorporated into the state foreign ops appropriations bill, so why someone would oppose it here, I'm not sure. But as somebody who knows a lot about energy and works on energy all of the time, I can tell you that one of the goals that we have as a country should be for the United States to win in the energy debate. That is, for us to, when you look at what a tremendous market opportunity new energy solutions are for our economy, it's for the worldwide economy, anywhere from $4 to $6 trillion. A lot of people like to talk about the Internet and all the great things of the Internet. Well, by comparison, it was somewhere between $2 and $4 trillion. So this is an economic opportunity way beyond that. Way beyond that, and when you look at what China is doing, they need to invest $3.7 trillion by 2030 in order to build 1,300 gigawatts of new electricity generating capacity. So the Chinese government alone needs to spend $3.7 trillion on energy. And so my colleague from Louisiana wants to say, well, let's hamstring U.S. companies that might have a solution to some of China's energy needs from getting the appropriate financing so that they can be successful in this program. So to me, it's wrong-headed in the fact that we want to be selling, as I said, just because in the Northwest, we already know what China is as a market. We sell them software, we sell them airplanes, we sell them coffee, we sell them lots of things, and we understand that they're a market. So to curtail the solutions that U.S. companies are working on, whether it's battery technology or smart grid technology or solutions for a whole range of product, you could even say nuclear power solutions to other clean energy source solutions, all of these things would be curtailed under the Vitter Amendment. So we don't want to go backwards. Not only does the United States want to be a leader in energy solutions in the United States should have the goal of being an energy winner in the international marketplace and growing jobs through selling solutions that we think can be quite successful in and around the developing world and in China. So I would ask my colleagues to defeat this amendment and to make sure that we get this bank, as I said, the Export-Import Financing Program. We have about 5 legislative days to give the predictability and certainty that American businesses would like to see in making sure that U.S. manufacturers win in a global marketplace. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The Senator from South Dakota.
I rise today in support of H.R. 2072, the Export-Import Bank Reauthorization Act of 2012. After too much delay, it is time for the Senate to pass this bill. The Export-Import Bank supports nearly 290,000 jobs a year, assists thousands of American businesses, and helps reduce the federal budget deficit. It shouldn't be surprising, then, to hear that the bank has the approval of labor unions, the Chamber of Commerce, the Business Roundtable, and the National Association of Manufacturers. Indeed, the bank is supported by a wide majority in both houses of Congress. The bill before us today passed with an overwhelming vote of 330 to 93 in the House of Representatives. As Republicans and Democrats come together in support of a truly bipartisan legislation, when we passed a similar bill out of the Senate Banking Committee last year, it had unanimous bipartisan support. Mr. President, despite the urgent need for passage of the bill, there are several Republican amendments. I urge all of my colleagues to vote against those amendments and pass this bill without delay. We are at the finish line today with a bill that has already been approved in the House and that has bipartisan support here in the Senate. Unless we pass this bill, the Ex-Im Bank's authorization will lapse on May 31, and nearly 300,000 American jobs will be at risk. Unless we pass this bill, American exporters will be put at a disadvantage to their foreign competitors, who in many cases already receive far greater assistance from their own nation's export credit agencies. Let's come together and pass this bipartisan bill and score a victory for the hundreds of thousands of American workers whose jobs are supported by the Ex-Im Bank. I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendments and support reauthorization of the Export-Import Bank today so that we can send this bill to the President and have it signed into law without delay. I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
I ask unanimous consent that we dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
I ask to call up my amendment 2104, which is at the desk.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Pennsylvania, Mr. Toomey, for himself and others, proposes an amendment
And I ask unanimous consent
2104.
that we dispense with the reading.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is an amendment that deals with the reauthorization of the Ex-Im Bank, and I would urge my colleagues to support this. I think it's a very important measure to begin the process of phasing out a very unfortunate practice that we participate in, as do many of our trading partners, which is the active taxpayer subsidization of exports. And I want to be very clear. There is a very real risk that is carried by American taxpayers, and that risk is systematically underpriced. The fact is the Ex-Im Bank extends loans and provides guarantees to countries and companies buying American exports. It provides those loans and those loan guarantees under terms that are not available in the private sector. There's a reason those terms are not available in the private sector. It's because the private sector necessarily requires full compensation for whatever risk they take. And there is risk in any loan. The Ex-Im Bank underprices these loans systematically. That's why it's important. That's why it exists. That's why it does business that the private sector can't win away from the Ex-Im Bank. It is because the Ex-Im Bank necessarily and systematically underprices the risk that taxpayers are ultimately on the hook for. This is what many of us object to, this risk that taxpayers are forced to bear. In addition to forcing taxpayers to incur this risk, it's really quite unfair to American companies that have to compete with the foreign companies that get the subsidized financing. And this isn't just theoretical, this happens all the time. Some years ago, I was involved in a dispute because the Ex-Im Bank was going to finance the acquisition of equipment by a foreign, I think it was a Chinese steel maker, which would enable them to make steel at lower prices than American steel makers could make, because the American companies wouldn't be able to obtain this equipment with the subsidy that the Chinese companies could obtain through the Ex-Im Bank. More recently is the case of Delta Airlines, which has observed that the price they have to pay for jets is higher than the price paid by countries, other countries who are operating competing routes but buying their aircraft through the subsidies of the Ex-Im Bank. In 2008, President Obama, referring to Ex-Im Bank, said, and I quote, "This is little more than a fund for corporate welfare." Well, I think that's a little bit harsh. I understand how this has come to be, and I understand why it's been extended, and I understand why people feel like we have to subsidize our exports because other countries around the world subsidize theirs. In other words, if our German and French and Chinese and Russian taxpayers are made to take a risk in subsidizing the sale of their manufacturers, then our taxpayers ought to take a similar risk. Frankly, I think there's a logical solution to this. Let's require the administration to sit down with our trading competitors and negotiate a mutual phase-out of all of these export subsidies. Frankly, it's in everybody's interest. We could have a level playing field on which no taxpayers are subject to this risk. No taxpayers are asked to subsidize the sales of private companies. And I think that's what we ought to do. This is what my amendment would accomplish. What my amendment does is it says we'll go ahead with this reauthorization of the Ex-Im Bank, but the increase in the lending limit, which we're currently at, the first increase, the bump up of $20 billion that is contemplated in this bill that's passed the House, that would be contingent upon the administration informing Congress that they have begun the process of negotiating a phase-out of all export subsidies. And the second increase, because I recognize that this phase-out wouldn't occur immediately, it would be a gradual process that would happen over time. But under my amendment, the second increase would occur only when the administration came back and informed Congress that they had indeed, in fact, reached an agreement with our leading trading partners on a framework that would phase out subsidization of exports. Mr. President, I think this is a very sensible way to deal with really the only compelling argument I have heard in favor of forcing taxpayers to continue to take this risk. And that is, well, everyone else does it, so we must. Well, since that's the only reason, then let's start the process of persuading everyone else not to do it. We have tremendous leverage in both bilateral and multinational trade negotiations of all sorts. There are ways that the administration, if it makes this issue a priority, can persuade our trading partners that this is the right direction to go. Each of our trading partners has their own constituency of taxpayers who would probably rather not be forced to subsidize this process just as we do. And I think this amendment does it in a careful fashion that allows business to continue for now, provided that we start in a different direction, a direction that will avoid continuing to put taxpayers at risk. So I urge my colleagues to support my amendment 2104, and I yield the floor.
Senator from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to speak in support of Senator Toomey's amendment and to point out some of the things about the Ex-Im Bank that are important for the taxpayers to know. I know as a businessman that if I could get a guaranteed loan, I would take it in a second. I don't blame companies that are interested in lower rate financing. But as congressmen and senators and as the President of the United States, our job is to protect taxpayers. And we're forgetting in this debate that when we guarantee a loan, we are signing the taxpayers' names to a loan guarantee. And in the real world, if an individual or a business guarantees a loan, that is a liability to them, a very real liability. And we're not just talking about the Ex-Im Bank. The taxpayers of this country are now liable for about $1 trillion worth of loans for student loans, trillions of dollars for mortgages, and other loan guarantees and insurance. We cannot continue to pass these bills without realizing that someday these bills are going to come due, and the folks across this country are going to have to pay them. We were promised when Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were making all these loans that it was good for the taxpayer, they were making money, we couldn't lose. But the taxpayers have lost billions of dollars. And now as we continue to guarantee loans around the world, in some of the countries these loans are going to now are on the watch list by Moody's and other rating services because the financial situation in Europe and all across the world is more and more strained. We cannot assume that this money is coming back to the taxpayer. We've probably heard already from some of the speakers that the Export-Import Bank was started many decades ago during Franklin Roosevelt's administration, and there was a limit on how much could be lent. It was $3.5 million. But we know how government works and how government grows. The bill we're considering this week is not in the millions, it's in the billions. And it's not $3 or $4 billion, it's $140 billion of loan guarantees to American companies that are selling overseas. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't help American companies who want to sell here in America, which means much of the domestic market for our products is financed at a higher rate. It's only the rest of the world, and we're the biggest consuming market in the world. This is not an idea that we should continue in America. We're in a bidding war with China and Europe to see who can subsidize the most loans at a time when all of us are broke. We need to bring this to a close. Senator Toomey's amendment is a logical way to proceed. The World Trade Organization is set up to make sure there's a level playing field and that we're not subsidizing imports and exports. But this is a very real subsidy and a very real risk to the American people. Let's begin the process of taking away this excuse of why we need to subsidize them. The excuse is always we have to do it because they're doing it. But as a world trading organization, we need to take down these subsidies and phase them out. We can do that and decrease the amount of money that the American taxpayer is liable for. It's common sense, and hopefully my colleagues will support it today. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield back.
Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I've enjoyed listening to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle talk about Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to speak for the next 10 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been listening to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle about Senator Toomey's amendment and my colleague, all about subsidies. Well, it's really hard to argue about subsidies when we're talking about the Ex-Im Bank generating $3.7 billion for U.S. taxpayers since 2005. So if this is a subsidy, we need a lot more of it because you're winning in producing jobs and you're actually producing money for the Treasury. And this is a very important tool for us to win in a global economy. I think my colleague who spoke earlier from South Carolina said it best when he talked about the manufacturing jobs that are now in that state and what an important tool it is for using this. So I'm not one of those colleagues who basically says, oh, we should do it because other countries should do it. I'm saying that you should recognize that that is going on, but that the United States needs to understand that there is a global marketplace for its products. And if you believe in U.S. manufacturers, as I do, and I've seen them in my state, they are winning the day in producing products and services that can beat the competition in international marketplaces. They can. I've seen grain silos, I've seen music stands, and yes, I've seen airplanes. And so the question is, are we going to let a U.S. product that can beat the competition in an international marketplace lose because the purchaser of those products is looking for financing mechanisms that will help them secure financing and purchase those products? So that's the question. So does the United States want to do those kinds of activities? I say we should be even more aggressive at it. Why? Because the global development of many countries that are now buying U.S. products is going to continue to grow. I know that in my state, Southwest Washington, in Vancouver, I saw the second largest grain elevator in the entire world, the second largest grain elevator. And I said, why do we have the second largest grain elevator in the entire world right here at the Port of Vancouver? And they said to me, because as the Asian middle class rises, they want to eat beef, and if they want to eat beef, they have to have grain. So what's wrong with the United States selling grain to Asian markets because they want our product or all these other products we've been talking about today? These are examples of products in the United States where we are actually building a product that many countries and many end customers want. We should celebrate that. And we should realize, as the growing middle class around the globe increases, that there's even more opportunity for the United States to sell products and win the day in the marketplace. So I don't know what they're talking about when they say subsidies, because this has been good for the U.S. taxpayers and it's been good for our economy. Now, specifically to the Toomey amendment, this amendment would require us unnecessary conditions for helping the bank in the future, and basically would put a hold on the financing of the Export-Import Bank until we negotiated on an international basis to terminate this kind of financing. As I said, for many states, these have had great benefits. In Pennsylvania, they've had the economic benefit, this is in just 2011, of $1.4 billion in exports and over 9,000 jobs. So here is something that has actually created jobs, created money for the U.S. economy, basically money back to the U.S. taxpayers that we have used to help pay down the deficit. So how is it that that's bad for us? And in the meantime, that manufacturer in Pennsylvania is winning and getting his product on an international basis and hopefully expanding his business to many, many different countries. Now, we had numbers on some of the other companies, some of the other examples of companies that have been helped by this in various states. these are products and services that other, like in my state, we have visited a silo grain producer in Spokane, Washington, that is winning and selling its product. We visited a music stand company, Manhasset Music Stands. Okay, you would think that somebody might be able to compete with them and beat them in the international marketplace, but in fact they are winning the day in the international marketplace, and the Export-Import Bank helps them in doing so. Mr. President, there's many, many examples of how this particular program is a win for taxpayers, it's a win for manufacturers, and it's a win for the U.S. economy. These amendments that are all trying to gut the Export-Import Bank would send this back to the House when we really need to be sending it to the President's desk, giving certainty and predictability to our economy, giving certainty and predictability to a program that's existed for decades, that often has been a voice vote. Instead of holding it up, actually make sure that manufacturers have the opportunity and know where the financing is. I thank the President, and I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands in recess until 2:15 p.m.
Senators taking a break now to attend their weekly party caucus lunches. They'll return, as you heard, at 2:15 Eastern.